In this video, we are taking a look at over 30 of the biggest and best LEGO creations from BrickFair, Virginia. From skyscrapers to castles and everything in between, come along with me and see some of the most talented builders showcase their amazing LEGO builds.
Can't even get it all.
Starting us off is one of the largest builds in the entire show. This humongous castle is the Red Keep from Game of Thrones, built by Dario Minetti. He said this full build took him several years, and it began with just this building in the middle. This build was packed with detail and had a bunch of minifigures throughout. There were also these really cool stained glass windows and lights flickering that brought this whole build to life. Next is this Batman's Batcave attack built by Mark Dowling. This build had some really cool components like the turning Batmobile stand, as well as the screen in the top right of the Batcave. There were also several other bat suits on display and a bunch of Batman's gadgets. Like this build, our next one has some really cool moving components. And not only that, it has running water. This is the Black Falcon's Mountain Fortress by Will Tachik. On its own, this is an impressive castle build on top of a large mountain, but he went above and beyond and added a fully functional stream system down to the village. And if you look at the other side of the castle, you can see the behind the scenes of how the running water actually works. I wouldn't even know where to start on how to build this one. Next, we have the Republic Fortress Delta by Ethan, Daniel, and Mason over at the Empire Lug Table. And this is pretty much how we all thought our clone bases looked when we were kids. This build features separatist forces and an AAT moving across a bridge to attack the clone base at the front gate. The stream of water and plants look really nice out front, and if we go around back, there's a lot of detail inside. There's more clone troopers getting ready for battle, as well as a huge cannon. There will be a bunch more Star Wars mocks shown throughout this video, like this one by Blackwell Bricks that features the awesome mall rampage scene, and this incredible Battle of Maigito mock by Coconut Brick Studios. This mock was full of action and it looked really cool with the different levels of elevation. And this mock is especially unique because we never see Galactic Marines being used. And speaking of builds that are out of this world, we have this moon-based power plant by Paul Neurader. The blue lights with the translucent green space pieces just look really nice on this. And it's connected to a larger power plant with a ton of cool Easter eggs. On the side of that, there was this huge quarry that was a couple feet deep. This portion also had lighting components, a bunch of minifigures, and some really cool space vehicles. Next, we have this Castle Red Skull build by Mark Glacken. This is a highly detailed build, and it's not even scaled to Lego figures, it's scaled to action figures. And it's not a Lego convention without a giant Lego city, like this one that has a huge spaceship floating above it. This town had it all, including notable shops and stores, and a bunch of minifigures doing various activities. And not to mention a full railroad system with working trains going around the entire city. This is just one of those Lego builds where you could stare at it for hours and continue to find new details. Just like this Coruscant Botanical Garden by Ranger Matthew. Everywhere you looked, there was something going on in this build. There were so many little battles going on, it was hard to keep track at who was shooting at who. There were droids battling clones everywhere you looked, and we saw some notable characters doing some really cool things.
This is Sparta!
I liked how this mock wasn't limited to one faction of Clone Trooper, there were a bunch of different ones. Some of my personal favorite details were this really buff Clone Trooper and this Yoda on a bark speeder destroying this droid. And last but not least, there was this secret little cookout on the side. Next, we have this incredible Blacktron rocket fuel cargo ship at Outpost 77 by Hoss Maslewski. This build depicts an outpost on a moon-like structure with tons of minifigures going to battle around a cargo ship. And this build might just take the cake for having the best lighting in the entire show. The minifigures blaster fire, the cargo, and even the ship itself all had tons of lights. And if we move over to the backside of the platform, we see what looks to be a giant mine built into the mountain. There was a cool watchtower overlooking the platform and a really nice area at the bottom that was completely illuminated. It's really cool to see vintage Lego themes like Blacktron getting completely vamped out with modern building techniques and lights. From Blacktron in space to Black Falcons and castles, this is the Black Falcon's Realm by Magnus Loglow. For this build, he took two classic castle sets from the 1980s and just made them bigger in his own way. It also features a ton of minifigures walking on a path to a wooded area. Next is another huge Black Falcon's castle by Bearded Bricks. This was one of the largest and most impressive castle builds of the entire show, and it featured hundreds of Lion Knights and Black Falcons going to battle. And as if this castle and epic display of minifigures going to war wasn't enough, the castle had a full interior with tons of detail. There was an entire dining hall, dragons on the roof, and a full courtyard outfitted with Black Falcons ready for battle. We are still yet to see some of my favorite builds from the show, but this had to have been the best castle Castle one in my opinion. Next is a really cool Invasion of Naboo mock by Swolebricks. This is a mock of the iconic second level of episode 1 in the LEGO Star Wars game. It's full of great details from the game, like the mini kit that only Jar Jar can jump high enough to get. Next is this Rebel Shipyard mock by Charles Wallach. This shipyard had a bunch of rebels prepping for debrief and featured some of our favorite characters like Zeb. One thing I really appreciated about this mock was the different species of rebels, like this Zabrak rebel that uses a very rare Jedi Knighthead. It also featured great ships like the A-Wing, Y-Wing, and Rebels Phantom. Next we have this Republic staging ground on Tempura by Tristan Jordan. This build featured a separatist force attacking a clone base, and there were some really cool vehicles. And we might as well turn the tide of the war and switch to a mock where the clones are attacking a droid outpost by Michael Hallinan. This was a landscape of clones and droids going to battle, and by the time I got there were already some casualties. There were also some notable characters like Maul and Obi-Wan going to battle in the middle. On the Republic side, there was a camp set up with tents for them to sleep in, troopers getting ready for battle, and even a speeder chase. Oh, and this clone trooper running away with an apple. But my favorite part of this mock had to have been this command table here. It looked really cool with a different elevation represented by studs to give the clone troopers a mission debrief. Next we have another unique Clone Wars mock from season 1 episode 15. This is the battle on Pantora between the clones and the native Talls built by MGS Brick. In the middle of this mock we can see the snow version of Captain Rex as well as Senator Chuchi and Chairman Cho. What I really like about this mock is that it's simplistic in nature, but it's actually very unique considering nobody army builds Talls like this. Next we have another snow themed Star Wars mock. This is the Renvar Citadel map from Star Wars Battlefront 1 by Jared Shields and Liam Von Berg. This mock had an insane amount of action going on, and it brought back a bunch of good memories from the OG Battlefront game. There were tons of droids and clone troopers battling it out, and everywhere you looked there was a new detail to be found. I'm not sure exactly how many minifigures this had in total, but there was definitely a lot. Some of my favorites were these custom 501st Airborne clone troopers like sharpshooters from the game, and I like the added fun of Christmas minifigures added into a snow mock. From snow worlds covered in ice to the lava planet of Mustafar, next up we have this incredible Vader's castle mock. This masterpiece was built by Jacob Hollis and consisted of over 100,000 pieces and over 100 lights, and it stood about 5.5 feet tall. It had TIE fighters and shuttles suspended in the air, and one of the coolest details was Darth Vader preparing to greet the Emperor from his landing craft. While this was my favorite Star Wars one, we have yet to see my favorite build of the entire show. Next we have this huge Spyrus Omega Assault Carrier by Dean Quest. For those of you that don't know, Spyrus was a sub-theme of LEGO Space in the years 1994 to 1996. While there was nothing released of this magnitude, it is super cool to see this theme get a massive ship like this. There were also these assorted mini builds of various vehicles that paired really nicely with the ship. There were also some really cool accessories attached. I would have loved to get some background information on this, but all in all, an amazing ship. Next we have Rescue on LV-666 by Joshua Hamilton. This was a pretty cool compound with ships and rigs, and it was being overrun by xenomorphs. The xenomorphs themselves looked really good, and they were all brick built. Next we have this huge moon base by John Klesch. There were dozens of classic spacemen working all around the moon base, and we also saw some recognizable characters. And speaking of recognizable characters, next to that was this Pizzatron that definitely had some familiar faces. Next we have this massive beach landscape that consisted of multiple separate builds from Nova Lug. My favorite build on the entire beach was this Waterfront Enter Sandman by Nick Capitos. This Sandman was huge, and it had a bunch of cool lights and a big bag of Cheetos in his hand. There was this Spider-Man suspended in the air and this surfer running for his life. Next we have this UCS Batcave by Keith Straw. This mock was insanely detailed, and I really wish LEGO would make something like this. Next is another one of my favorite Star Wars mocks of the entire show, this incredible Liberty on Ryloth by Owen Cosner. This was a very accurate depiction of the 21st episode of Season 1 of Star Wars The Clone Wars. The landing out front looked really nice, but the building itself was a masterpiece. It's a very unique shape, and there were some really cool building techniques involved in this. And there was actually another Ryloth mock in this show. This mock is when the ATTEs were navigating through the canyon with Mace Windu and Clone Commander Pons. There was another hill across the way with tanks shooting at them. Next we have a massive LEGO city that had moving trains and some of the tallest skyscrapers in the entire show. There were some cool parts like the Daily Bugle and this building that was rocking back and forth. Another group of builders built this other massive town on the other side of the convention center that had some real-life building depictions. We've seen some absolutely incredible builds, and now it is time for my personal favorite.
Subscribe to Stud Stash for legendary LEGO videos.
And that is this incredible Halo mock of the Silent Cartographer. This mock was ginormous. It was a huge L shape that had multiple sides to view. It also had multiple floors with tons of detail on each one. This mock could seriously be its own in-depth video. It basically had the entire layout of the level in full detail. On this side, there was a Wraith attacking a Warthog as well as several elites. Behind them, there was a bunch more of elites as well as grunts. The grunts and elites looked incredibly accurate for being brick built instead of custom. I think my favorite character of the entire mock was this Flood character right here. He just looked so derpy but perfectly captured the original LEGO aesthetic. On the corner, there were some hunters demolishing some marines, as well as a very nice room with a spinning ring and some elites looking at it. Some of the other rooms consisted of sentinels attacking the Covenant, as well as Sergeant Johnson and a couple more elites. The landscape up top was definitely the best part though. It was highly detailed and there were a ton of minifigures and vehicles all around. And of course we have the legendary Master Chief. And speaking of legends, here is the group of builders that put this whole thing together. This build had moving parts, a beautiful landscape, a ton of detail, and a bunch of minifigures. If you watched this video all the way through, make sure you leave a comment on which of these builds was your favorite. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and stay tuned because I've got a ton more on the way. As always, thanks for watching.